This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our flower series. In this video, we'll be making Buttercream Sweet Scabiosa flowers. It's broken down into steps so you can skip ahead, rewind, and rewatch as desired. We're going to be making two colors today, two shades of pink, and I'm using American Style or Simple Buttercream. You could easily use a Swiss or Italian meringue if you prefer one of those. And we're going to be using the following liquid gel colors: Neon Bright Pink, Violet, and finally, a touch of Coal Black. Got a little bit of each out over here on a lid and a toothpick ready to go, and we're going to be using relatively small amounts. I don't want to make really intense colors today, and I want them all to have a bit of a cool, muted, dusty little vibe to them. So I'm going to start with several specks of pink because I want this first shade to be kind of like a medium tone, and just the tiniest bit of purple and a little speck, that was super tiny, little speck of black. And hopefully this should give me a nice kind of cool shade of pink that has a little bit of a muted vibe to it. So we don't want it to be too intense. If it reads too purple when we're done mixing, I can just add a little more pink to it, just to bring it back in the direction that I want. And I like where that's going. Just want to make it a little more intense. So just a little bit darker hue. I think that's trending in the right direction for us. Might just add a tiny touch more color just to really bring it out of kind of like pastel, light pink territory, more into like a medium pink. And I like the cool kind of dusty vibe got going on. So I'm just going to do two more of those tiny specks because I want to keep that up. I don't want to overpower it too much with the pink I've added. There we go. And that's a nice kind of lovely shade of pink. It's just starting to kind of border on being like a medium tone for me. So that's a perfect little spot. It'll deepen some too as it sits, and I think it's going to end up right in a nice place for us. Our second color is going to be for the centers of our flowers, and it's just going to be a lighter shade of pink. So I just want to basically do the same thing with just not as much color. So more pink than purple and black, and just those tiny touches of the purple and black, just so I kind of keep the same vibe to the colors. And you're basically just making a lighter shade of the same color. It's going nicely. I think I just need a little more of my pink, and I'll be good. It's looking just a little bit purplish right now. And we want it to definitely read as a nice pink. There we go. That's lovely. And it's going to look nice alongside the other color that we made. They're going to have that same kind of tone and vibe to each other and pair well together. We're going to use two bags to make this flower. They're both 12-inch disposable. You can use whatever kind you want. We have one that's fitted directly with the tip, and the other one we're using a coupler with because we'll be using multiple tips. Our darker shade of pink is in a bag with a 104. Our lighter shade of pink is in a bag with a coupler, and we'll be using a number 12 and a 101. we're going to review the techniques for our sweet Scabiosa flower. And this is kind of a simpler, easier style of Scabiosa. So if you don't have Korean tips and you're thinking, oh, I can't do those beautiful flowers, this is a different version of it that's using just our regular tips. So we're using 104, 101, and 12, so nice and easy, things that most people have on hand. We're going to start with some narrow heart-shaped petals, and that's going to give us kind of a ruffled edge on the end. And we're going to be at 45 degrees, back of the bag is at 3 o'clock, and we want to make them narrow, these heart shapes. So instead of drawing slow and kind of wide like we would normally do, we're going to pull almost straight back and do that little dip in the middle to give us a little heart shape, but it's going to be narrow and elongated. So you still have that little heart at the end, but the petals itself are really narrow and kind of long and skinny. Next, we're also going to do some kind of fold over ruffled petals. And these are ones where we're making kind of a wave, and we're also going to pull towards the center. So we're going to be at 45 degrees and 3 o'clock, and you want to think about kind of wrapping on top of itself. So you have to pick the tip up just a little bit, and we're going to do just a nice little wave, pull back on itself, pull to the center like that. So you can see it kind of makes this kind of little S-curve shape to it. And that's going to give us some body and some bulk and give us the look of some layers of ruffly petals in there. We're also going to make some little fins or wedges, whatever you want to call them. And these are petals we're really just going to use to kind of fill in some of the gaps and give our flower a nice full look on the outside edge. We're also going to use our 104, and I just want to take the back of the bag and rotate it a little bit so you can see that tip is almost kind of lined up and the whole opening is almost like facing the surface that we're piping on. And that way, when I squeeze and pull towards myself, it gives me a nice little ridge that looks almost like a petal that's sitting on its side. So that's what I call a fin, or sometimes we might call them little wedge petals, but they kind of stick up for us and have a nice little shape to them. And finally, with our 104 tip, we're also going to make some little flap supports. So for these, you just want to hold 45 and 3 o'clock, and we're just going to pipe some little flat, just kind of, I don't know, ribbons of frosting there. They're just going to help connect some of our early petals and give us a little support and structure, and also help give us some height and dimension because we're going to pipe on top of them as well. For our lighter pink, the first thing we're going to use is the number 12 tip, and we're just going to pipe a dot. So think same as we always do with dots, up off the surface. It's that number 12 tip, so it's a big opening, so you do have to be a little higher up. Let that frosting touch down, balloon out, then stop and give it a nice swirl to finish it off. And finally, we're going to do some little wriggles. You want to think a little bit about techniques like Corneli lace for the pattern for this one. The important part is that the fat end of the opening of the tip is going to touch the surface we're piping on, and the skinny end is going to be pointing directly out. Your bag angle in the back end is really going to change on this because we're actually going to be piping this on our dot. So you might have to tilt and lean a little bit and just do whatever works. But the idea here is to just pipe these little wriggles so that you have the look of these really tightly ruffled petals in the center, and it's going to be on top of that ball, and it's going to give us the look of a kind of separate mass of petals in the center of our flower that has yet to really open and unfurl. We've gone over our techniques, so now let's talk about how we're going to put them together, so how we're going to build our blossom using them for our little sweet Scabiosa flower. The first thing we're going to do is pipe 8 of those narrow heart-shaped petals, and we want to be towards the outside edge of our nail, so there'll probably be a pretty big void in the center, and that's fine. And we want to pipe those kind of equidistant, so I find it easiest to kind of go north, south, east, east and west, and then go kind of the northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. And that kind of gets them approximately equally spaced. They don't need to be perfect. In fact, if they're a little irregular, that's even better. So don't worry too much about the spacing. Just get 8 on there, approximately equal distance. And then we're going to pipe those little flat supports, those little ribbons, in between of each of those petals. And I'm going to go kind of like halfway the length of the petal and just join them together. And then that sets us up to pipe our next round of narrow petals. We're going to do 8 more, and you're just going to pipe them on top of those little support wedges. So we'll pull just a little bit closer to the center, so not quite as far out as the ones before, and they'll just be resting on top of those supports. And that's going to give them a little height, a little lift off of the surface, and it's going to help start giving our flower a tiny touch of dimension. Then we're going to do our fold over petals. So between that second row of hearts, just go in and do fold over petals between each one. We'll come in next to them, and to the left of each one, we're going to do a little heart. So kind of tilted up on side of it. And to the right, I'll do a little fin. And that should give me a nice kind of full look to this, where we've got lots of big petals. They're kind of piled up high and they taper down towards the center. If you have any gaps or spaces or any awkward bits where you feel like it needs a little bit of extra, you can go in and fill any gaps as desired. So either put a little heart in there or a little fin, whatever works for the spacing and whatever gives you a nice natural feel. And that'll make it look a little irregular and not too static, not too planned, not too everything is so perfect. Then once we like the look of those outside petals, we're going to change to our bag of light pink. We'll start with the number 12 tip, and we're just going to pipe a dot in the center. And you want it to kind of fill up and kind of connect the ends of all those petals, but you don't want it to be too big, because we want to leave some definition between these two areas. A lot of times they have these nice, beautiful, unfurled, roughly huge petals, and they have a tighter kind of ball or mass in the center where some of those petals have yet to really unfurl, and it's a nice kind of just tight little mass of ruffles going on there in the center, and they're really beautiful and often a slightly different shade because the petals haven't fully opened. So once you get that dot in there, we're going to change the tip on our bag for a 101, and we're going to go over and make those little wriggly ruffles any way that works all over the surface. I like to start down at the bottom edge and kind of go around a little bit and then pull up to the center. And I feel like that gives me a nice look, but this should look really organic. No two patterns are ever going to be the same. Just kind of get them on there tightly and work carefully so you're not running into your own work. But if you pipe on top of something or you knock into something, just put another little wriggle on top of it and cover that up, right? So blemishes don't really matter. We're looking for a nice ruffled look there in the center. It should have the look of a little bit of chaos. And that's going to give us some beautiful blossoms with tips that most people have on hand. We've reviewed everything we need to know, so let's get started piping. I've got my large 3-inch flower nail. I've got just a little bit of parchment stuck to it with some extra buttercream. And I'm going to take my bag with my 104 tip, and I'm just going to start lined up at the center, and then I'm going to pull out. So kind of there's that middle inch of space, and I'm going to kind of imagine a little circle there and just have that fat end of the tip lined up with that. And that's going to give me some room to pipe one of my narrow hearts right there. So bag's at 45 degrees, back end is at 3 o'clock, and I just want to think long and skinny and pull a nice little narrow heart right out there. And as we talked about earlier, I find it easiest to kind of start with a cross shape, or if you want to think about directions like north, south, east, and west. And that gives me nice spacing then to come in between, because we've divided the area into 4, and now we can just kind of go approximately in the middle of those. And you can see that leaves a little gap between each of those petals. And they're relatively evenly spaced, but not perfect. Now it's time for our little supports. So those just little ribbons of frosting. So just think about lining the top edge, that skinny into the tip, about halfway up the petal, and just get a little ribbon on there, kind of connecting them. Don't worry about damaging the back ends. Our paper is kind of big and we don't have much on it right now, so you can see it gets a little floppy. That's fine and kind of expected. We just want to get some frosting in there. That's going to help make everything secure and kind of connect everything so that they'll be easier to lift up later. Now it's time for our second row of narrow hearts, and we're going to go just right on top of those little support ribbons that we piped. So just right there. And you can see you can't go too far past it, or you'll start to flop over and it'll feel kind of unsecure when you're piping. So you want to start just a little closer to the center, but not all the way there, and pipe right on top of those. And it's fine if some of your petals are a little longer, a little narrower, or a little fatter. It's now time for our little fold over petals. So I'm just going to start in between two of those narrow hearts that's on my second row and pipe those nice little S curves. And you can see I'm pulling down towards the center, and that gives me a nice ruffled look from the side. And with those supports and some of those petals that are higher up, and some of them that are right there on the base of the nail, you can see it gives us a nice little look. We've got some variation in what the petals are doing. It looks like some of them are still unfurling, and some of them are completely open and at their full width. And it gives it a nice, really just pretty feel. It's time to do our final round of petals with our darker pink. And we're going to do a narrow heart to the left of each of our foldovers and a little fin on the right. So you just want to pick a point to start, pull up, and along the side. And you can see that gives us a nice little bit of variation and a beautiful look. And it's helping to fill in the center and really join all those petals together and make our blossoms look nice and full on the edge. And if there's a spot where you can't really fit something in, or it looks too close together, you can just kind of fudge it. There was one spot there where I just did a couple of fins next to each other, but you can see that gives us a beautiful look. It's really ruffled and it has almost like a V shape to it. From the side, it looks gorgeous. You've got a lot going on there, and we've got a nice little well in there to finish off with that tight center grouping. We have our bag of lighter pink. It's got the number 12 tip on it. I'm just going to go right here in the middle, just right above that surface, and make my nice dot. When you get the size you want, I don't want it to be too big, but I want it to take up that area and really join it together. I've changed the tip on my bag of light pink to my 101, and I want to make sure I have it facing the right direction. So just take a second to look at that opening. I want to make sure that the fat end is going to be pointed towards and touching that dot that I've done. And you can see I'm just going to kind of work myself in at any angle I can, start down there at the bottom, and just really kind of coil up and get some nice little wriggles on there. And so just turn your nail any way you need to. Sometimes I like to work along the bottom edge and then go in and fill in the top. And if you need to, ruffle in between your areas. You can see it just kind of gently and slowly starts to kind of fill that in and make a nice little surface there that has all these little delicate ruffles on it. And just as you come around, just make sure you're filling in any little gaps. You can see I've kind of got a little void there. It's a little easier to view from the side. And so I just want to make sure that I'm getting that in. And so that the whole thing has kind of a nice look from each angle. So just kind of view it at any angle you need to make sure that it has kind of a nice look, like a nice kind of central mass there. And it looks relatively even kind of from all angles, and that's a little easier to view from the side than it is the top. We have this nice little ruffled ball in the center that looks like the center of our flower. It has a beautiful frilly delicate look, but we've used all regular petal tips to create this, so it's a nice one that you should probably have all the tips for on hand if you have any basic kits. That's all for this lesson on our sweet Scabiosa flower. If you like this one, try our regular Scabiosa or maybe even our basic rose. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.